Hello, and welcome to the Oracle of Light. I'm Shauna Domalain. I'm a lifelong medium and certified life coach. And making the connection with the afterlife has brought me the greatest joy. Since losing my son, Jack, I have navigated grief, heartache, and despair. And it was through connecting with my son on the other side that my heart began to heal and I was able to find joy and meaning in my life again. Now, I'm inviting you into this space as I explore the afterlife, the grieving process, and rebuilding after loss. If you'd like to discover the spirit world and how to move through the loss of a loved one or child, you have come to the right place. This is the Oracle of Light. Welcome to the Oracle of Light. I'm your host, Shauna Domalain, and I have the beautiful Emily Graham here with me today. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I'm very excited, very excited. Would you share with our listeners everything about Emily? What would you like to share? Tell us who you are and your journey that brought you to where you are today.
That's a big question. So I am a mom. I am a wife. We live in the Orlando area. I guess I'll just go right for it. So I'm a mom of three. My oldest son, Cameron, he died at the age of 7. And we are in our 8th year. We're working through our 8th year right now, which blows my mind. So he was here. Actually, he's been gone longer than he's been here, which is surreal. Yes. So I still have 2 girls here that I'm raising. My daughters right now are 11 and 7. And so we are kind of doing the whole mom thing, but for a long time, we really struggled with that. So my son went from, I always say, healthy to gone in a matter of 12 hours. He was sort of your normal, healthy mama's boy, full of life, and literally went to bed Christmas Eve, if you can believe it, perfectly fine. We had a little bit of a cold stuff we were dealing with, but he was perfectly fine. And in a few hours, he woke up and he was not fine. So we escalated very quickly. By like 2 a.m, Christmas morning, we were loading him in the car. I was taking him to the ER. We had this big medical mystery, had no idea what was going on. And he ended up, I don't know, between 5 and 6 a.m, went into a coma that he never awoke from. We were transferred to Children's Hospital. On that transition over there, things got worse. And he ended up, his brain hemorrhaged over several hours. His organs started shutting down, and they really had no idea what was going on. And so we ended Christmas Day, which was also my birthday, removing life support. And so completely changed everything, turned our world upside down. And so, as I said, we spent years. I always tell people child loss is one of those things that it takes years to figure out and understand and adjust and I don't know, reconnect, even think about reconnecting with life. And so we did all of that. And through that process, I've reconnected with Cameron. I know that sounds crazy to a lot of people, but I reconnected to Cameron in this new way. And I feel like he is my greatest teacher. He taught me unconditional love. He made me a mom, all of that. And now he is still teaching me. And so he and I say, do the work that I do together. I'm a grief and life coach now. I work specifically with other bereaved parents, sort of talking about how we navigate child loss and how we figure out who we are now and how we maintain that bond with our kids and how we figure out how to do life again.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing all of that with us. Thank you. Thank you. I love that you have created such a beautiful community, and it's just this beautiful all-inclusive community for everyone to come together, anyone who has lost a child. I love what you said. I mean, we become just different parts of us. We just become like this completely different person. It's like life that we knew, it doesn't exist like that anymore. And so it's sort of recalibrating that. And it's really finding it finding our place in the world again amidst this loss. Now, there was something that you had written about. It was making friends with our grief. Would you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that was something that came through my journey. When you're in sort of that self-healing spiritual kind of journey, a lot of people talk about the concept of like making friends with things. And it really sort of hit me in a way that was perspective shifting or really helpful to me. And the way that I look at it is when I was in early grief specifically, I guess just the way that you feel when you're there and you are in this state of just complete shutdown. You are pushing back against your reality. You do not want to be there. You can't do anything. You don't want to do anything, right? So you're creating a lot of resistance in your life. And that resistance takes a lot of energy to kind of hold that up and maintain that. And what I found was I was creating a lot of extra struggle for myself in that space. And so when somebody explained this concept of befriending grief, the way that they explained it was this story that they kind of shared. And I always loved this story. So they basically talk about it as being like, let's say you have a party at your house and you have this friend that comes over. It's not really a close friend. It's not somebody that you like really well. They're kind of annoying. They're kind of hard to be around, but they're going to show up and they're going to be at this party. You really don't want them there, but you know that it's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of drama, a lot of stress to sort of push them out and force them out. And even if you do, they're just going to come back. And so instead of like doing all of that drama, all of that stress, you've got to find this new way to sort of engage with that friend. And so instead, it's more like you invite them in and you make space for them and you sort of like, it's a different feel, right? When you can sort of invite them in and make friends with them. And so in this analogy, right, you are basically the house and this friend is your grief. And it's like, they're going to come in, they're going to be here. This is our new reality. We can't force them away, even though we try and try and try.
Yes.
If we just let it come in, it's almost like, you know, when your friend shows up at your house and you're like, hey, come on in, let's sit down, let's have a drink, let's chat. I found that when I could start to do that with my grief and I would feel the waves coming and I would be like, okay, I am in a funk right now. All I need to do is just shut down the rest of my life and just be like, okay, here we are. Let's do this. Let's do nothing if we need to, but just be with it, make friends with it. And I find that it moves through me much faster than what it ever did before. So that's kind of what I think about, right? When it's making friends with our grief and it's literally inviting it in and saying, hey, you're going to be here probably for the rest of my life. So let's figure out how to do this.
I love that. I love that. And our common connection is that we've lost children. And so, you know, and I've shared this before, you know, when I lost Jack, it literally spun me into this fog. It was almost like I was in this fog for like 2 or 3 years. And it was just like, I would distract myself with anything. So I didn't even have to think about it. It was like, how many cupcakes do you need? Can I volunteer this year? Can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? I was just catapulting myself into anything I could find to not even look at it. You know, how much laundry can I do today? Did I clean this? Did I do this? And it was this continual. And what you were saying, I mean, creating that kind of struggle for myself and that resistance, I was exhausted. Yes. I would fall into bed at night and I would have this fitful sleep and get up in the morning and go, I would just sort of feel it sort of bubble to the surface. And I think, nope, we're going to go do this.
Here we go again. Yeah.
No, we're not doing that. And it was almost like, I told people, you know, it was like Groundhog Day. And it was just like, okay. And it wasn't until I reconnected with Jack. It wasn't until I had that reconnection with him. And I knew that he was okay. And I had that experience that I was finally able to let the grief in, as you said. I was finally able to, okay, I can't keep pushing this aside.
Yeah, it's exhausting. It's mentally, physically, emotionally exhausting when you are in that deep grief space. And I 100% agree. Once I validated, I think my biggest question throughout those first few years is, where did Cameron go? What's it like where he is? How do I figure that out? Does he still exist? Right? So it blows up your entire belief system. And so you're kind of putting that puzzle back together. And I feel like when I put that puzzle back together, then I was like, okay, so he's still here. We're still connected. Now I can look at this grief experience and figure out, what do I need to do to heal what I can in this, so
Yes.
that I can do this. Like it was this
Mm.
process.
Oh, absolutely. And, and it was funny because people would say to me, well, you're a medium, just connect with him. And he was literally gone. It was just like, what just happened? Where did he go? Oh
Yeah.
my God. And yeah, you're right. Like, it shook everything, all of my beliefs and everything, all the faith I had and all the work that I did up until that point. It was just like, does it even mean anything? Is it real? Where did he go? What happened? What have I believed in this whole time? What if it all doesn't add up anymore? Yeah. It was just like the core of my being was just rattled, and I didn't even know what to do with it. And so, yeah, I tried to run away from it. And it was interesting because then when I started to work through everything, I realized I was in shock and I was in disbelief, and I started to delve into the different stages of grief, and what I've realized, and I'd love your perspective on this as well, is what I've realized is that there's no cookie cutter. Here's a book. This is what you're going to experience. These are the stages. This is what it's going to look like. This is how you're going to feel. It's individual. And this is our heart. I mean, when you lose a child, that is your heart. And so it's like, there is no book on the planet that can describe that. So I'd love your perspective on that.
I completely agree. I tell people all the time in my community, I'm like, I wish I could just give you a checklist and say, do this, 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 and this will all fix it for you. But like, we can't fix this. It is so individual and unique. And I think it's important for us all to share our stories and to be open and honest about what we're going through, because that's where the connection comes from. And it's like, oh, you feel that too? Okay, that's what this is, right? It helps us put words to what we're feeling. It helps us normalize it. And then we can sort of say, okay, so that's what this is. So now here's what I can do to help myself through this. Yeah. So we need that collective community, I think, of support.
I 100% agree. 10 years ago, I mean, Jack would have been 10 this year. And so 10 years ago, it was like I didn't know where to go or who to talk to, and all of our friends, they hadn't started their families yet. And so it was just kind of like, what do I do with this? Yeah. It was like this version of me, just didn't exist anymore. And so it was just this whole identity crisis, and it was working through the grief and everything. And I can look back now and I can go, oh, that's what that was.
So it's like new perspective. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's so true. And it's, and I tell people that's why I do the work that I do now is because of Jack. And I don't want anyone to feel alone with it. I want to give everyone a space to share and talk about it and honor our children and the experience. And, I always tell people, I just have a different relationship with Jack now. He isn't here in the physical, but he's 100% alive in spirit. And, and if you believe in that, not everybody believes in that. And, I've had a lot of people come at me over the years about what I do, and that's not real. And how do you know? And, I always tell people, well, how do you know that you're breathing? How do you know that you're breathing? And you know what works for me works for me. And I honor your journey, what works for you. And, and like you said, it's interesting, and it's almost like, I don't know if you've experienced this. I've had several people come at me over the years, like, oh, well, just stop talking about it. Just get over it. And maybe you should have done this and you could have done that. And da, 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 da. And I had a medium, a psychic say to me, well, you could have adopted, or you could have done this, or you could have done that. And it was just, there's almost like there's this shame around talking about child loss. And it's like you didn't do enough, or you didn't do the right stuff, or you shouldn't talk about it, or it's not real, or oh my goodness. Have you experienced any of that?
Yes. I would say a lot of what I've experienced is because I've shared our story so publicly. Mm-hmm. And so you get the people, I feel like the people that do that level of judgment are people that they don't know you. They're on the other side of a screen, right? I got people questioned what we did that day. I had people shame us for leaving the hospital to go home and tell our daughter on Christmas Day that all these people were coming into town because her brother was not going to survive, right? Like all of these crazy things. I've had people come back and, shame me for the way that I grieved or for something that I wrote, and being like, you need to do this, or you're doing this wrong, or you need to be committed, right? All of these crazy things. And I really think, like you said, every journey is individual. I believe in transparency and sharing that stuff because it's in those darkest moments that people feel so alone. And if you hear somebody else say something, then you get this glimmer of hope, right? That, well, maybe this is just a moment and I can get through this because they did, right? Or there's somebody else that feels this. And I just think the more that we talk about it, the better we are. And again, I never ask anybody to rebuild their belief system or do exactly what I've done, right? Use mine as a model. You take what resonates with you and you try it. If it works for you, fantastic. If it doesn't, keep looking. So it's like we all will have a different belief system, a different whatever, and that's okay. You figure out what resonates with you and what works for you.
Yes, I love that. And I always tell people the same thing. I say, you know what, take what resonates and leave the rest. Yeah. I'm not here to tell you, you have to do it my way or my way is the only way to do it. It's just, it's a different perspective, a different take on it. And it's very much along the lines of the work that you do. It's, I don't want people to feel alone. I want them to feel like they have a safe place to land. I mean, this is our heart, and I remember my daughter, Emma, she will be 18 this year. I remember she came home from school one day and I just finished up a client day and she said, Mom, why do you always have Kleenex on the table? I said, well, sweetheart, we're holding sacred space. We're holding someone's heart and their loss and their grief and all of their hurt. And so the tears are going to fall and the tears will help. And the tears will just, help them maybe to release things and just really honor what they're experiencing. And so it's, I'm sure that you experience that as well. I mean, everyone that I work with cries, and it's just, it's, if I have a session or I teach a class where someone doesn't cry, I think, what happened? What's going on?
Right. What's wrong? Yeah.
And everyone.
I was going to say, I host weekly small groups with parents. And when new people come in and we tell our stories, even in normal weeks, you might have a hard week. And as you're retelling something, you start to cry. And everybody's always like, I'm sorry. And we have a rule in all my groups. Everybody will be like, no, we don't apologize here. Because you have to have that release and you have to share that and make space for that.
You do. And I always tell people it's messy. Life is messy. Grief has its own category of messy. It has its own book, its own series, if you will. And it's and we talked a little bit about this the other day, how, it's so important to have the right people in your world, the people that have earned the right to hear your story. Right. And, after I lost Jack, I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't, I was angry at, we had started the in vitro process and things just didn't go according to plan. And so I didn't even know how to attack that or what to do with it or who to talk to. And then I found that relationships shifted because of it, because a lot of people were like, it wasn't real. It just, so be thankful that you have your daughter, and just some of the things that people would say over the years. Now I kind of look back and I think, where did that come from? Like, why would you say that? Right. And so it's, I love what you say, there's no apology required. It's just, and everyone grieves differently. Everyone handles it differently. And, I'm sure that you do this as well. When I'm working with people, I like to tune in. I just like to have a look at their heart and just kind of have a look at their energy and see where they're sitting and what that looks like. And I don't know if you find this, I find some people, they just get stuck. They get stuck and it's just like, and almost like they want to, it's almost like they want to wear the loss as a badge of suffering. It's like they can't possibly imagine building a new life, building something beautiful again.
Yeah, I think that is very true. I think that people don't like it when I use the word choice in grief, but it took me a long time to see choice. Yeah. And I do think that we choose some of the things, the ways that we respond, the ways that we move forward, the things that we are doing. Yes. I think too, the language that we use in grief. When you come into any grief community, especially in child loss, you are constantly bombarded with people telling you it never gets easier. You're going to grieve forever. You're going to do right. And there's this laundry list of things. Yeah. And you do create this belief in your system that, so this is how it's going to be for the rest of my life. And I think for a lot of people, like you latch onto that because you feel that connection in pain. We talk about this a lot. Like when I was in that deepest part of grief, I felt most connected to Cameron at that time. And it took me a long time to realize that that connection can exist over here just as strong. And so I have to figure out how to untangle this.
Yes.
And I think for a lot of people, making that transition is one that is never actually made, or they really struggle to make.
So true.
Get stuck there.
Mm-hmm. It's true. And, and I will say to people, this doesn't negate the loss that you've experienced. Yeah. I said,
yes.
I'll tell them suffering is a choice. Like we can choose to suffer. We can choose to stay in there. And I've heard, as you have, I've heard such horrific, tragic stories of how parents have lost their children. And it's just, oh my goodness. But that loss it's a loss, and it's yours, and it's not going away. And I love what you said about, making friends with it, You
got to figure out how to do this. Yeah.
Yes.
You can't just lay down and die with them. I feel like one of our greatest ways to honor them is to figure out how to do this. And we do it with them. And that for me was such a big perspective shift. Like, they are not gone. I hate that word gone. Mm-hmm. They are still here. They're here in a different way. And we have to figure out how to tap into that and use that.
Yes. And you'd mentioned this the other day about, connecting into their essence, mm-hmm. the essence of who that is. And, yes, it's still there. And then we can still connect with it. And there have been probably, dozens of moms I've connected with over the years. And they've said, well, I'll be at peace when I'm with them, when I'm connected with them. And it's just, it hurts my heart to hear that, because yes, in those early days, I thought, I don't want to be here. I mean, I wasn't suicidal, but I was like, no. He's supposed to be here. I don't want to be here without him. I want to be where he is. This is not how it's supposed to go. And so, I think a lot of it, is just, no, not accepting it, not at all. Like, I wasn't able to reconcile any of it for years. And then finally being able to get to a point where I had grieved him and I'd mourned, and I joke with people, I didn't wear mascara for years because I didn't know when I was going to be triggered or what it was going to look like. It was just like, I'd just be, taken over by this tailspin, it was crazy. Now, and not that I say to people, let's look for the silver lining. Let's look for the positives. Let's, we've gone through something traumatic and something that's changed us. And if I can help one person to not feel any of the despair that I felt to that degree, then, amazing.
Yes, it's a win. That's why we do this, is that one person. And if it's more than one, awesome. But it's the one person.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. Tell us a little bit more about your group, your weekly group. What does that look like?
Yeah, so I run a program called Living with Grief. It is designed for bereaved parents. Literally, I don't like the term grief support necessarily, because I feel like you have this idea in your head of what that means. And this is not that traditional program. Literally, it's people who I would say are on what I would call a healing journey. It's sort of that journey of, we're going to figure this out. I can't be like this for the rest of my life. And so we need people, right? We need to raise ourselves out of those grief communities where people are choosing to sort of stay in that state of suffering, or they're at the early stage where they're not ready for the next thing. And so this is sort of the next thing. And so I do weekly lives in our Facebook group every week on a whole bunch of different topics. A lot of the kind of stuff that we're talking about today, like making friends with our grief, and right, how do we figure out our emotions? How do we come back into our bodies and understand what we need? How do we build a self-care practice? How do we do all these things? Mm-hmm. Right. So it just offers tools and discussion and things that are uplifting and helpful. And then, so I sort of have two levels. I have the basic level. And then for people who want a little bit more support, we do the weekly small group discussions. So we have a topic every week, and we get together in a Zoom room and we all share our weeks. And then we're like, hey, let's talk about this. Right. So it gives us this constructive way to talk about, what we're experiencing and what we can learn from it, and, how we integrate this with our life and figure out how to keep taking steps forward.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And just for our listeners, we will have all of the information, how to find Emily and all of her beautiful offerings in the show notes. It's, I love that, and I want to say about 5 years ago, I started to really delve into, okay, what kind of support is out there for parents? Like what's out there, and I read books and I listened to podcasts and really started to delve into it. And I found some different groups and organizations and I just didn't find the right fit for me. And, and that's okay, right? Like everyone finds who they need and what they need. And I believe when we're ready, the right person or the right opportunity will start to show up. It's like when we're ready for it, it's there, and the universe will have our back in that regard. And so it's beautiful to know that you are there and that you've created this beautiful space. And not that this is a group or a community that we would have ever have said, hey, I'd
want to be a part of
that, right? Hey, you know what? I think that sounds
come on
great.
in. This is so much fun.
No. No. And, I say to people all the time, there isn't anything that I wouldn't do to have Jack here in the physical. There isn't.
100%.
Yeah. And, I always tell people, I'm 10 years in. So those first few years were horrific. I was brought to my knees. I just didn't really know what to do or what end was up. And it was all consuming. So if you have someone who comes to you and they're at that place where it just feels all consuming, is there space for them in what you offer?
Yes. So there is space. I like to say that the things that I'm putting out there meet you where you are. I have people who are brand new, like weeks and months into their grief, that will join the program. I have people who have been with me for a really long time, people who are 5 to 10 years into their grief. Mm-hmm. And they're all in different phases of being ready for what comes next and looking for the right things. Some of them already feel like they were doing that. They just wanted more people to connect with and more opportunity to do that. So it's a huge spectrum. And I literally believe it kind of meets you where you are and it grows with you, right? Because it's that take what resonates, release what doesn't. Mm-hmm. And I love what you said earlier about the universe sort of putting things in your path. That's how I think about it. I always will tell people, when you're ready, you're going to know you're ready, and you're going to see things kind of placed in your path, and you're going to say, okay, this is it. Let's take a chance to try this. And it's trial and error. Everything that we do in this life is practice. It's literally like, how do I want to show up? How do I want to do this? Now let's go out and practice it. Okay, what did I get wrong? What do I do next time? And that's how I tell people to approach re-entry to life after grief. Is like, we take it in little tiny baby steps, and it's like picturing, how do I want this to look or feel or be? Let me try that. And then what went wrong? And then it's just sort of a process of working through that.
I love that. Re-entry into life. That
we withdraw, right? We disconnect, we go into ourselves, we isolate, and then it's scary to go back out into the world. So we have to work through a lot of fear. We have to work through a lot of triggers. We have to work through all kinds of stuff just to be in life. And so it's tiny little baby steps to just reconnect and re-enter life.
Oh, I love that. That was beautifully put. That was perfect. And I found that it after losing Jack, it just impacted everything. I mean, that was the beginning of the end of my marriage. It changed how I parented Emma. It changed how I showed up in the world. I felt like, for those, I look back now and it's like I just had a happy mask on. It's like everything is fine. And then I would go to my room and shut the door and bawl my eyes out. And then be like, okay, this is fine. And I didn't give it a chance to just go through me and do what it needed to do. And I think that is one of the big pieces that I love to give parents, is that if you are able to just sit with it and be with it and just let it go through you, it will not destroy you. You're going to, I promise you that if you allow the process, allow it to be ugly, allow it to, oh my goodness, I used to drive. We're in Calgary, Alberta. We're in Canada. So we're above Montana. That gives people a reference point. Yep. And about an hour outside the city is this beautiful natural reserve. It's called Elbow Falls. And so I would literally once a week, I would grab a latte, hop in the car, and I would drive out there. And I would sit there and I would just cry and cry and cry and cry. And that's where I started to find Heart Rocks. And it was like, then it slowly started to transition into, Jack, Mama needs Heart Rocks. And then it was just, I would get there and it would be like, okay, maybe I would have a few tears and I would just sort of have a release. There's something about releasing near fast moving bodies of water for me. I'm not sure what that is,
Okay.
but I always tell people that is
Yeah.
cleansing. And so I would go, and then pretty soon it was like, I think there was one day I was driving back into the city and I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't cry today. And I had this pile of heart rocks beside me. And it was just like, oh, okay. Okay. And it's, it's finding that community that can hold space for you, that community that understands. And it's, again, it's, this isn't a group that we chose to come into. This is just,
Right.
we've made the best of it. And we've figured out how to reintegrate into life. And, I love to be able to share my experiences because perhaps it'll make it relatable for other people that
Yes.
you can get through this and you can come out the other side of it. Yes, are we more resilient? Yes. Do we have a greater capacity for love? Absolutely. Like it just allows us to show up as the best versions of us and do the work that we do.
Yes, I agree. And I totally relate to the becoming the best version of yourself. And I think that's another thing that people struggle with when you go through a loss like this. Like, I didn't want my child to die for me to be the best version of myself.
No.
Like, well, I don't know. I think we create meaning around our story, and we all do that in our own personal way. I never in a million years would have imagined that I would have believed that things played out the way that they were supposed to play out. But looking back now, that is my belief. It was not my belief early on. And so I do think that that's a really hard thing to grasp and to proceed from. And yeah, I would give it all up for him to be back here. But this is the hand we've been dealt. And so why do I want to be in misery? No, I want to try to find a way to do this. I want to try to find my purpose, live my purpose, right? Give back, have something positive come.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I listened to a podcast from Peter Crone, and he had said, what did he say? He said, the past is the past. Everything happened the way that it was going to happen, and we can't go back and change it.
Yeah.
And so if we can come to a point where we can, accept that, okay, that's happened. Not to say that we like it or that it was painless. Just okay, that's what's happened. Now, what do we do with this? One of the things that I found was I would go for a walk every day down by the river, and I would walk, and I just kept thinking, I've got to figure this out. I can't live like this.
Yes,
I just felt like I was just this shell of myself walking around. And whenever there were other people around, I'd be like, oh, hi, how is your day? And oh yeah. Like it's like, I would show up, but I really wasn't there. I was just this vacant, like life was just, like I said, like it was a Groundhog Day. And I just kept thinking, no, there's got to be something else I can do. And then I was actually guided to have a reading with this beautiful soul. And in the reading, she had said, well, Shauna, have you talked to Jack? And I said, no, I can't see him. I can't feel him. I don't know where he went. Like I said, I don't know what to believe in. Do I believe in God? Is there a God? I said, I'm so angry at the doctors, at everyone. I said, I'm so angry. I said, I don't even know what to do with this. And she said, well, look up. And I looked up, and there was this beautiful angel walking into the room, holding hands with a little boy who would have been 3. And I just started crying, and he got closer, and I realized it gets me emotional to this day. I'm like, I'm looking at myself. Oh my God. And it was Jack. And so it was just in that moment, it was like everything was okay. Yeah. It was okay. He's okay. I could see my other loved ones. I was like, okay. He's okay. He's okay. Oh my God. He's okay. Oh, and it was, for me, it was making that connection with him that allowed me to start to heal, that allowed me to start to go through it and work through it. And just, yeah. Do you get signs from Cameron?
I do. So I started getting signs really, really early, and I didn't know that they were like, I didn't really know what to do with them. So within the first few weeks he was gone, I started seeing his shadow run through our house. And I was like, I can't tell anybody this because I'm going to be committed. Like, this doesn't happen. Right. I was super spiritual before, believed that this stuff happened, but it happened to other people. It did not happen to me. Yep. And then when this experience happened, it was like, holy crap, what is going on? So that was going on early. I was also seeing the number 12 over and over and over again. And in my first medium reading, we did our first one. We were probably like 2 to 3 months after his death. And she turned and looked at me and she said, you've seen him? And she was like, and you've been seeing the same number over and over and over again. And I'm going, yeah. And my husband was like, no. And I was like, yes. And he's like, what the heck is going on? So that was the 12s. During that time, I was literally like, is he there? Is this him? Like, it has to be him. And I'm like, is he going to use this number? And so then it became the 12s. I feel like there's almost like a working out that communication plan, right, across the veil, where it's like, he's like, okay, she's seeing the 12s. Yep, you're getting it. I'm going to use the 12s. And now we figure it out.
Yeah.
So 12 is the number. I don't know why. And hearts. You talked about heart rocks. For us, we will just get hearts in different places too. So those are the two biggest ones that we will get all the time. And I tell people all the time, it took me a long time to see, they show up in the moments that we are trying to live again, that we are engaged in life, that we are reconnecting in a way that he is like, yes, I'm here, right? I'm showing up. I'm still here. And when you can make that shift and find them in those moments, it becomes easier to make that transition.
Oh, I love that. That was beautifully, beautifully put. I love that, and I call the signs, I call them sprinkles from heaven. It's like, they're just little sprinkles from heaven. Like they're with us, and they're even more excited that we get it.
Yeah.
They're just like, oh, they got it. Keep sending them. And it's just, I think it's so beautiful. And I always tell people, again, and from my own experience, as a medium, and, I've connected with the other side for my whole life. And so to not have that connection with him was just so debilitating. It was just heartbreaking. And then to have it again, as I said, that was how I started to heal, because they're marinating in unconditional love. They're marinating in magic and possibilities. And so when we can connect into that and start to receive that, we can bring more of that into our life. And it's just amazing. And I don't know if you find this, I find so many synchronicities, through Jack, like I found our beautiful friend, Sydney. And then she was like, you have to connect with my friend, Emily. And I'm like, who's Emily? It's fascinating how, the synchronicities and how, the universe just sort of comes in and they're like, hey, this is where you need to go. And this is what it looks like.
I completely agree with all of that. Yes. The synchronicity. I'm big on signs too. Like Cameron and I almost play this game of like, I'll get this heart somewhere and I'll be like, okay, yeah, it's just a heart. And then I'll get like another sign right after it. And he's like, no, this really is me. So sometimes there will be like a series of things, because I try to connect every sign to like, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What's happening? So I can interpret it. And if I can't make that connection, then I'm sort of like, yeah, it's a heart. Yep. Hi, buddy. It's a heart, whatever. And he's like, no, this is a sign. Take this as a sign.
Oh gosh, I love that.
There's still a continued relationship. There is still that if you allow it or you sort of open yourself up to it.
It's true. And people always say to me, the number one question I have is, well, I can't experience my child. I can't do this, or it's not possible for me. But I always tell people, it's how open and available you are, and where you are with your grief, because grief is just, it's a lower emotion. Right. Yeah. And, not to get too scientific, but I love the work of David Hawkins with the consciousness scale. Right. And, I always tell people, for us to be able to connect with our loved ones on the other side, we need to be up, closer to love. And that's the vibration at about 500, and shame is at 20, grief is at 70. So I always love to give people that visual to say, this is kind of where you need to be to create a magical life, to experience your child on the other side, but your vibration is down here. So we've got a little bit of work to do. And so it's to try to give someone's logical mind something to sort of grab onto, so then we can get into the possibilities, we can get into the non-logical and we start to.
And I always like, I love that scale, because I've shared that scale in my groups too, to talk about like, just, we are energetic beings. And I feel like a lot of times when I go there, people think that's a little bit too woo-woo. And so I always try to balance that with, well, science has proven that literally everything in the world has a vibration. It has a frequency there. It's made of energy. Right. And so then I can take people into that space, and I feel like it's a little less, woo-woo. That's the word. I feel like everybody sees everything as, okay, that's a little bit too out there, but it's really not.
Right. It's so true. And I love the work of Joe Dispenza, right? I mean, Dr. Joe is fantastic. Like you were saying, they have scientifically dissected the vibrations and what that looks like. And I always tell people, if you can imagine, when you walk into a room and you flick the light switch on, how quickly that current runs to illuminate the light in the room, that's how quick spirit energy is. And so if we're dense already in a physical body, and then, if we've got these heavy emotions, it's kind of like a hot air balloon. Like we've got stuff weighing us down. But if we can find ways to release all of that, then we feel better and we're lighter. And then we're able to make that connection even more. I love that. I just love it. Now, tell us about your book, Confessions of Child Loss.
Yeah. So I wrote my early grief. That was sort of one of my outlets. And I wrote it and I wrote it and I wrote it and I shared it, and it resonated with a lot of people. And I always sort of knew, I tell people, like, I always knew throughout my entire life I would write a book. And I tried several times and I was like, I really don't even know what I would write about, until Cameron died. And then I was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to write about.
Yep.
So Confessions of Child Loss is really just all of the early, ugly, messy stuff that I went through, sprinkled in with that reconnection to Cameron. It's really like, I take it through our story, and I literally have like these 12 things that are sort of like, these are my confessions. They're the ugly things that we don't like to talk about, that I believe we need to talk about. And it really, I never intended the book to be here's the breaking and the ugly and the messy, and then, here's the healing part of it. I never expected there to be healing in this. I wrote the first however many chapters, and I had the book on my computer, and it was just sitting there. And I'm like, I don't know how this ends. I don't know how to end it. And it wasn't until I was into like my third and fourth year when I started to do all of the work myself and figure myself out and find that there was some healing in this. And I was like, okay, now I know how to write the end of the book. And so it's literally that evolution of, being in that space where we don't heal from this. And this is the ugliness. This is what we experienced, to this is how we reconnect with our kids. These are the ways that we do this again.
Absolutely. I love that. Would you share one of the confessions?
I have so many confessions in there. Yes. So I go through literally the fact that we don't heal from this is one of those confessions, to say, like, I really thought that we didn't heal from this. One of my other confessions was the fact that I felt like I killed my son in this, right? And so the grief and the guilt that we carry, I was the one that administered the medication that kicked off the attack that he had that night. He had a rare blood disorder. We didn't know it existed. And so I always come back to that, because I had a physical reaction to doing that. And I was like, he shouldn't have this. I shouldn't give it, but I couldn't explain why. It was just an over-the-counter nasal spray, and I used it, right? So I gave it to him, and that was the catalyst that kicked it off. So I spent a lot of time sort of working through that, and feeling like if I had just listened to myself, he would still be here, right? So there's all those sorts of things where it's like, this is something that happens. This is something we think about in grief. I talk about the fact that communication, like, I thought he was gone. He's not gone. He's still here, just in a different way.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Now, would you share a little bit about, we talked briefly about it the other day, and you mentioned it earlier about building a self-care package. Yes. What does that look like for someone?
I think that we are conditioned to think about self-care in such a small, frivolous way, right? It's going to the spa, it's getting our hair done, it's getting our nails, it's taking a day off, a mental health day. But I feel like when you get into the grief experience, especially, it's way bigger than that. And so we have to come back into our bodies. We have to understand what's going on in our thoughts, what we're feeling, what we're thinking, what we're doing. We have to understand how to take care of ourselves in those moments when things are really, really bad. And I look at self-care as a much bigger thing than what I ever did before. It's literally learning to say no to things, even if they're things that we think we need or that are good for us in the moment, but we aren't ready for them right now, or it's not good for us right now. It's understanding, right, when I'm super anxious, like, my nervous system is dysregulated and I need to go to this toolkit, right? It's building this toolkit of things that we can practice and do that sort of puts us in a seat of empowerment. I feel like when we live in grief, grief is in the driver's seat. It is driving down the road. It is in 100% full control. Mm-hmm. And so we have to learn how to pull it out of the driver's seat and put ourselves back in there. And it's really just about understanding ourselves better, learning how to take better care of ourselves, and expanding, or I guess opening ourselves up to what self-care is, because it's not selfish. It's literally understanding what we need in every given moment, creating boundaries, creating the environment that we need in order to thrive and do our best. And so it's understanding what all of that is and kind of putting it together.
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. I call it on my end of things, I call it our spiritual toolbox. And so I always love to empower people with that spiritual toolbox so that, when we're not chatting, they can, I'm going to read a book, or maybe I'll meditate, or maybe I'll do this, or, what is it that I need? And I love what you said, what is it coming into our body, right? That's first and foremost, coming into our body and, really figuring out what you need on all of those different levels. And, I think it's wonderful work to be able to tell people, these are stages that perhaps people go through. I also love to take it a little bit deeper and tell people you may experience some of those, you may not. You may ping pong between a bunch of them, and you may have a bunch of your own stuff thrown in there. So it's like a montage of everything. And so I love that you empower people with the self-care package to start to really tune into what is it that I need. I think that we're so used to looking outside ourselves for answers. We're so used to, right? Like I'm going to book this person.
To ignore ourselves and what we really need and make everybody else happy. And like, we have to learn. I feel like this whole journey for me is unlearning a lot of those things and relearning new ways. It really has been a lot of that. And it's entirely figuring out what we need, how to put ourselves first, and having the tools available.
Oh, absolutely. It's, you just nailed it. Right. And I find, and after, we talked about this a little bit earlier about how, losing a child, it's the opportunity to really be the best version of you. It's really, it's like you're just shedding so many different layers and so many different stories and the patterns. And, this is who I thought it was, and maybe I'm not that. And who am I really? And what does this look like? And it's really quite fascinating when we start to look at it from that perspective. It's just, there's so much that's wrapped up in all of that. And, I found it got to the point where I really sat there and I thought, okay, what do I know that's true for me? What I know that's true for me is that my heart feels like it's shattered into a million pieces, and that I had to find the right people to share it with. I needed to, have, go sit by the river and, not wear a mascara. And so I kind of had all of that put together. And then what I found was interesting was, after I went through all of that, like when I finally, realized, okay, he's safe. And, he used to come in and we play count the freckles. And so he'd be like, how many freckles do I have? And so we would have these little fun games. And, sometimes he would say, close your eyes, open your hand. And I open my hand and there'd be a frog in my hand. I'd be like, what are you doing? Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Right. And so he has this jovial, beautiful energy, and I see him growing up. And so when he comes through to me, I see a 10-year-old. Right. And that isn't the same for everybody. Right. And what I found was interesting was, after I started connecting with Jack and I started finding the heart rocks, and, he started coming into my dreams all the time. And, I just really started to feel him. It was interesting because I sat there and I thought, what were the things that I enjoyed before all of this happened? Like, where did my joy go? Where did my fun go? And then I made the click that, I can still be with my grief and my heartache, but I can also be, at
the same time. Yes.
Like, just
skill that we have to learn is like feeling more than one thing and having the joy come in, but also having that little bit of sadness that's still there, that grief that still exists, holding space for both. Yeah, absolutely. And I always tell people, we are multifaceted. We're kind of like a Rubik's Cube. What day is it? We're green this day. We're red this day. There's so many parts to us, and it's being inclusive with all of the parts, right? Like, there's still days, 10 years in, there's still days where I'm crushed. It's just something will happen. Something will trigger me. And it's like, okay, there's that soft spot again. It's still there, right? Like, and that's okay. And just
It's okay. And it's so sweet because the days, like I love how you said that when you find the signs, if there's something happening and then there's the sign. And there was one day, I can't remember what happened, but it was just, I was having a really off day and it was just really tender. And I kind of sat there and I thought, maybe I'll meditate. So I went down by the river and I sat there and I was just quiet. And then I saw this little hand. And then this little hand came on my heart and Jack was there. And he's like, Mama, don't cry. I'm here. I'll help you. And it was just, oh my gosh, just this sweet little ball of magic is how I can describe him. And it's just, yeah. And and again, not telling people you have to believe this and you have to believe what I believe. Everyone believes in something. And so whatever that is, just honor it and love it and allow it to grow. And, but I've just found from the spiritual perspective is that I wouldn't have been able to do this if I hadn't connected with him again.
Yes, all the people who believe there's nothing after this. Like that breaks my heart because I'm like, oh my God, I don't know how that I would ever have survived if I hadn't reconnected with him in this way.
It's true. It's so true. Like my life, as painful as it was, my life began the day that I reconnected with him. And it was like, oh, you are. And same thing. I blame myself, I should have listened to this doctor and I should have done this and and we had started the in vitro process. No, I shouldn't have waited and I should have done this. And so I went through that whole thing of just, totally throwing myself under the bus. And it was just like, no. And it gave me just a sense of calm. There was a coach that I worked with years ago. And he said, what if you made the safest choice at the time? What if the choices that you made at the time were the safest or that was the best that you could do at that time? What if we could reframe it and we can change it and not beat ourselves up and not sit in the misery with it because it's just, oh my goodness. And, there were so many different groups that I'd reached out to and sort of did some homework on. And it was almost like misery loves company. It was like, I attended a few of their meetings and it was like, everyone would share their heartbreak, but then there wasn't anything lifting it. There wasn't anything positive. There wasn't the duality. And so there
wasn't any hope. Yeah. I feel like we're so void of hope in that space.
Yes. And it's almost like people give up. I remember after a cousin of mine had passed away, I remember my aunt saying, you're not supposed to bury your children. You were not supposed to bury your children. And she was never the same after that. It was just, and again, not to negate the loss or what happened around that, but it was just, we are the creators of our life. And so losing a child is one aspect of our life. It isn't our entire life. Yeah. And again, it's not something that we, wake up one day and think, hey, this, I'd like to experience this. No, that isn't right. How it works. Mm-hmm. But yeah, again, we learn to invite it in and we learn to, always tell people, what if we were to get curious about it? Where are we feeling that in our body? What am I thinking right now? What is it that I need right now? And just really tapping into that. And so do you find, I find a lot of people want to make it intellectual. It's like, these are the stages and this is what you're going through. And then they completely forget the body and our spirit.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. I believe there is a mind, body, soul connection. Like you have to be working on all three fronts to figure this out. And it's so easy to intellectualize it because we want to read a book. We want to hear how somebody else did. And then we want to just be like, okay, so I just need to do this.
Yes.
But so much of it is the feeling. And we just it's so hard to sit with it. I know you talked about earlier, like learning how to sit with it. I remember feeling like if I start crying, I'm never going to stop. And so that was a scary place to be. It would be out of control. And I did not like to be out of control. Mm-hmm. And I think learning how to be in that space and knowing that is temporary. You're going to go through that and release that and move through that in a way that is you're not going to get stuck there. You're not going to stay there forever. Mm-hmm. I think that's important learning in this as we learn to sit with it and learn to do it. But yeah, that reconnecting our brain and what we're thinking about to our hearts and what we're feeling, that's a big part of this.
Oh, it's huge. And, I always tell people, if you, as crazy as it sounds, if you can acknowledge whatever it is, mm-hmm. oftentimes that energetic charge will start to dissipate because there's just that grief just wants to be heard.
Wants to be noticed.
Yes. It wants to be noticed and wants to be acknowledged. And once we can say, okay, I see you. Okay. I don't want you here. I hate you. I don't want you here. okay, you're here. What do we do with this? And then,
Right.
I always tell people, you have to be very gentle with yourself. You need to give yourself grace. I mean, if your favorite person in the world was going through what you're going through, how would you treat them?
Yeah.
Right. Like we need to just really, really take care of ourselves. And there are a lot of people that I had in my world early on after I lost Jack who were, again, I'll just get over it. Well, it just wasn't meant to be. Da, 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 da. And it was like in their mind, it was done. It was done. And then I gave myself permission to be with it and let it be whatever the heck it needed to be. And it was like, no, this is a loss. It was fascinating. I had this reading once. And yeah, readers go to other readers, right? Like we always have
readers. You can't read your own people, right?
I can't get my own stuff. I'm going to go get somebody else to help me. So I had an Akashic Records reading. And so the Akashic Records are like the history of our soul. Yes. And so I had this reading and I hadn't said anything about myself. And he said, oh, I'm sorry for your loss. And I just kind of looked at him and he said, this loss is etched in your heart forever. And he said, oh, okay, we need to sit with that. And that was the first thing that came out of his mouth. And I thought I was having a really good day that day. Right. And it's just like energetically that he could pick up on that. I thought, whoa. And that has always stuck with me because he said, it's a part of who you are. It's not something that you just get over. And especially for mothers whose child didn't come into the physical, I love to hold sacred space for them, for us, because 6 months before we'd even started the in vitro process, Jack was in my dreams. Emma had her big sister t-shirt on and she had a list of books that she was going to read to him. And she was like, when is my brother going to be in your tummy? And why isn't he here? And she talked to him more than I did. And he was already part of our life. My husband at the time, he named him. He's like, yeah, we'll name. He's like, are you sure it's a boy? I said, oh, it is a boy. Yeah. He's here. And he would run around the house and it was crazy. And I remember we named him. It was like he was real. He was that real. And then to go from that real, even energetically, and then he was gone. It was like, oh God, what do I do with this? Like that was, again, it's like your whole world is just shattered in whatever way that looks for you, right? Because it's so different for everyone. And I always love to give women permission. Like the one woman said to me, my husband just doesn't want to hear about it anymore. He doesn't want me to talk about it. We have other children. I need to focus on them. Just, you just need to let it go. You keep talking about it. You keep bringing it up again. And I said to her, we have to talk about it. Yeah. We have to talk about it. That's how we honor that child. That's how we honor our experience. And I said, we will talk about it till the cows come home. We will talk about it for the rest of this incarnation. I said, and that's okay. I said, if other people don't get that, then maybe that's not the conversation that you have with them.
Yeah. I like the word both. I use the word both a lot. And so you can have both things at the same time. And they can be two very competing things, right? And it's just learning to be okay with that. So I'm going to talk about the loss and at the same time can focus on life. It can sort of be both at the same time.
It really is, right? Like I love what you said earlier. I mean, that grief is always there. That is, like I'm different and I'm a different person than, I always tell people, like I'm not the Shauna I was before I lost Jack. This is a totally
never will be. Yeah. We don't just go back to being who we were. We don't just go back and fit into that life again.
No, you can't. And now I found this really fascinating. I was looking through, trying to figure out what we were going to talk about today. I mean, we could talk for hours and hours, I'm sure, days and days and days. But there was something that you mentioned that I found really interesting. If you'd love to share a little bit about it, was how to protect our energy when grief is exhausting.
Yes. Going back to what we talked about and just the fact that we are energetic beings. Every single time that we interact with a thing, a person, a place, there's like an exchange of energy. And we spend so much time in grief, feeling exhausted, feeling an inner state of turmoil where we go out and we do the things that we might not be ready for. We are with people that might not be the right people. We are trying to show up in a way that isn't authentic. And I look at protecting energy as like figuring out what we need, who are the right people, what are the right places, what's the right timing, and it's boundaries, right? It's creating these boundaries that what do I allow in my life? What am I going to tolerate now? What are the things that make sense to let in? Because these things that I'm interacting with, they're either going to fuel me with energy or they're going to take it away. And so we have to learn that. And it's by feeling too. Again, it's that coming back to our body. We are so conditioned to ignore everything that's going on in our body. It's why we don't understand our emotions. It's why we don't understand what's going on with us physically. And grief is such a physical experience. And so we have to learn that. We have to figure that out. We have to come back into our bodies. And then we have to figure out, what are those boundaries? How do we put ourselves first? How do we, decide what we tolerate and who we spend time with, and when we say yes versus when we say no.
I love that. I love the parallels in our lives. I think they're just fantastic.
Right?
I love it. And, it's interesting because, you said who and what is fueling my life. And I started saying about 6 months ago, I really started to, shift. I had some major life changes, and I really started to think in terms of, does this add value to my life? Yes. Is this adding value to my life? Am I adding value to your life? Are you adding value to my life? And something I read, I geek out about this stuff. There was something I read, in this blog post, this woman, she said, you need to start looking at the distractions, are these things adding value to your life? Like I very rarely watch TV, and I don't listen to the news. And just from the energetic perspective, I figure if there's something important, I'll hear it from my friends, or it'll be on Facebook, right, or it'll come in some other way. Right.
Yeah. It'll get there.
Yeah. And so I found that I was really, really protective after everything that I've been through. I'm really protective of rebuilding my life. Yes. Of putting the pieces back together. And it's interesting because it's boundaries. It's like, I don't think I had really strong boundaries before everything that happened with Jack. And I realize now, that I get to choose, and I need to have those boundaries. And in this blog post, she said something about, for example, if your phone lights up and there's a text message and you go, oh God. And I started to notice that happening through email, through text messages. Someone would message me and I'd be like, oh, now what? And I sat there and I thought, okay, that's not honoring them.
Yeah.
That's something that's not honoring me. And so a lot of relationships, you just have to bless and release them. And I think, and I think it's from going through everything that I've experienced with Jack has given me the chance to really, really evaluate how I show up in the world, because we're not here forever, right? It's what am I here to do? What would I like to contribute? Is there a legacy I want to create in honor of Jack? Like, what is it who can I help? Like, who are the people that I'm here to help? And so it's interesting because it all kind of stems back to, it's not a group that we've willingly chose to do. I suppose if we looked at it from a soul perspective, if we went down that route, it would be, oh yes, this is this is how it was all supposed to happen. But people just leave that for another day. But it's kind of like, that's really interesting. And it's really becoming cognizant and aware of, what is it that fuels my life? Like, and I say to people, what lights you up? Let's find things that light you up. Like I said, I sat there that day and I thought, what used to light me up before this happened? And I was able to go back and gather some of those things and really start to, and I talk to my angels and my guides all the time. So I always say, angels, fill my life with so much fun this week. Angels, I need more ground crew, please. Let's do this. Angels, what am I missing about this? Angels. And so, from the spiritual perspective, I can say to people, just invite those energies into your life, and they will help you.
Yeah, I do a similar. So I look at it. One of the things that jumped out at me is when I would be in a room full of bereaved parents and I'd be like, what do you want? Right? When you think about, like, for me, it was hard to go back and be like, what was in my life before? Because that didn't fit now. And so I'd be like, well, what do I want my life to look like? And I can't really come up with that. Yeah. And so I go to a feeling word, and everybody comes up with peace. Everybody wants to feel peace after this. And so I'm like, so you sort of have to back into this. And I always tell people, like, what are the words that you want to feel? How do you want this to feel? And then you back into, how do you make it feel that way? And that's the work. So like you said, getting a text message from somebody and like your body tenses up and you're like, oh my gosh, that to me is my sign that I have healing in that, things that I have to do to create those boundaries, to release that relationship, to work through whatever is going on for me. And then it makes it easier for me to show up. And so I have these 3 words that I use that are sort of my guideposts as I go forward. And I'm like, I want my life to feel authentic. I want my life to feel balanced. And I want it to be all about love.
All about love. Oh, I
and
love
so
that.
I'm like, if something, someone, whatever doesn't help me achieve those things, then no, like that's not what I want. That's not what I'm going to do. And that's how I try to sort of create that. Obviously, it's not perfect, right? There's times you have to say yes to things that don't fit that. But when we talk about kind of rebuilding a life and how to do this, I feel like that gave me a way to, I don't know, highlight a path forward, identify some of my own work that I need to do. And it helps me to get to what everybody wants, that peace, to have that space where you can feel okay, good.
I love that. That is beautiful. And it was interesting because, when we talked about boundaries, it was the text messages that I would get from people when I would kind of go, I kind of cringe. They were relationships that I previously released. I blessed and released. And for whatever reason, allowed them to come back in again. And as you've probably experienced, I mean, you have a healing energy, you have a healing frequency. And so a lot of people are drawn to you just for that. And that's something that I've had to navigate over the years, right? Like I've been invited to hundreds of lunches and events. And then at some point it's, can I ask you just one question? No. Back off. Right. And again, it's boundaries. You're right. Because I had to look at that. It was like, okay, why am I cringing? Like when I get a message from them, why am I cringing? What is that? And I would get curious. And it was just like, okay, this is an opportunity for me to express a boundary and just, sort of figure that out. Like I've got several people in my life that, aren't working right now. And so on my client days, I'd hear my phone ping, 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 ping. And I would just like, and then of course I'm like, ooh, what's
let me check this.
I don't need to do corporate taxes. I'm going to check my phone. No, we need to do corporate taxes. Right. And so it was interesting, and just little boundaries with, telling people, on the days that I'm seeing clients, you probably won't hear from me because my phone is downstairs, and it's just, and having those boundaries, I think my boundaries were just so wishy-washy before everything happened with Jack. And then after that, it's just become, not that I'm a hard ass now, but it's more, does that work for me? How does that make me feel? And I love how you keep referencing the body, because I think that we're so used to just ignoring it, shutting it off, whatever. It's logical. I'm going to think my way through this. And, working through grief, I mean, that's whenever I'm grieving, my entire body aches.
Yeah.
My entire body feels like it's crying. And I cry and I cry. And then I think I can't cry anymore. And I will cry more and more and more. And then I need to sleep. And it's just, it's really fascinating. I didn't understand what it was at first. Those first few years after losing Jack, I felt like the flu for 3 years. I was like, my body ached and it was sore, and my heart just felt like it was just so sore. It was like, oh, right. And then again, having that compassion for myself and going, oh, what does my body need? What does she need? I used to kickbox. Like that's what got me through my divorce. I joke with people, but I'm like, kickboxing got me through my divorce.
I'm sure that was helpful. Yeah. I tell people all the time, go get a punching bag.
Yes. It's wonderful. And in this, I haven't been kickboxing for about a year now. And it's like, my body doesn't want to do that anymore. My body doesn't want to, I find other ways to, work out, and I'm a gym rat, but yeah, it's interesting. Right. And I love what you said. I mean, grief there are all those different layers to it. It's not just, here's your list, right? Here's your checklist. When you're done that, you're done. And we move on.
And we move on and we're good. Yeah.
And we move on. Right. And it's not something that we can compartmentalize. It's not something that we can just be like, oh, okay. Right. Instead, it's like, I see this big chest of drawers and it's like, okay, well, grief is out. Like you can't put it in there and it stays in there.
That drawer doesn't close. Yeah.
It's like, it's always open. It's like, oh, where is he? He's out. Oh no, he's not in his drawer. Oh no. Do I wear mascara today? Right. Like it's just, it's a completely different way of life. Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I loved our conversation today. Thank you so much. Just a world of information, and you're just such a beautiful resource for parents who have lost children. So we have we will have all the information about your book, about your groups, and how people can get in touch with you with the grief coaching and your program, and all of your amazing gifts that you're sharing the world. So again, thank you so much for taking the time and for sharing your heart and sharing your beautiful Cameron with us. And just so grateful.
You. And no, me too. I so appreciate all this time. I loved our conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Mwah. Thank you for listening and experiencing the miracles of the afterlife in this episode. Be sure to tune in and subscribe so you don't miss any of the guidance or special bonus episodes. And if you loved this episode as much as I did, please leave a review. I would be so, so grateful. You can follow me on social media at Shauna Domalain. And if you would like a free guided meditation to raise your vibration, you can head on over to my website at livealifeyoulove.org. See you next time.